Hello and welcome back to Tech Talk. I'm glad you're able to join me. Today we're going to be talking about something interesting, and that is how to go about preparing for and writing your A+ Core 1 exam. And the goal of this video is to help you to choose the most efficient tools to get the job done and to ensure you get that exam passed on the first time. The reason I'm doing this video today is, of course, I just passed mine. I wrote my Core 1 exam at the end of March 2022. And on a scale of 100 to 900 with a pass of 675, I scored 859. So that's quite a high score for this exam. Pretty proud of that. And I think that's why I'm in a good place now to talk about what I did to study to prepare for it, because it was a good result. If anything, I probably didn't have to study as much as I did. But I figure I'll pass on what I did, because if you learn similarly to the way I do, it should work for you as well. So let's get right into it then. First of all, the A+ exam, in case you're not aware, it's done by CompTIA, and it is really a foundational information technology training exam. It really goes over the core functionality and the core learnings that you need to have for both hardware and software if you want to pursue a career in IT. As such, this isn't really an exam or a course that you have to get really too excited about. When I first mentioned that I was taking the A+ exams and I wanted to have my certification, a ton of people told me, oh, it's so hard, you won't have a hope of passing it the first time, good luck with that. And it's just not the case. It's important to remember that this exam is foundational skills. This is not requiring you to know everything you need to know about computer hardware, about networking, software. It's foundational, so there's no reason why anybody, if they're willing to put in the time and effort to study and to do a little bit of practice, why they can't get it the first time out of the gate. It is a hard exam. There is things that you have to know and remember, but it's not impossibly so. Like I say, if you're willing to put the effort in, you should be able to complete the exam first time around and get a passing grade, no problem, and we're going to help you do that. So the course is broken down into two exams. Core 1, which focuses more on hardware, and Core 2, which focuses on software. Now, the great thing about it is they've divided up those two exams so that they don't really overlap. And what most people do is they treat them almost like two separate fields of study. So you can go ahead, study for your Core 1, take the exam, pass it, and then move on to study for your Core 2, take that exam, pass it. You can do it as almost two totally separate entities. And that's great because it does make the learning process a lot simpler. Now, right now, it's an interesting time to be making this video because right now CompTIA is in the midst of upgrading these courses. As of April 1st, 2022, a new set of A+ Core 1 and Core 2 exams came out. So the new exams are called they're numbered 220, 1101, and 220, 1102. Now, effective April 1st, if you want to start studying for your A+, these are the exams you should really be studying for because they're the new ones. The old exams, the 220-1001 and 220-1002, will be retired on October 20th of 2022. So if you're already studying for your A+ and you were shooting for the older exam, the 1001, 1002, you have to write both of them by October 20th of 2022. CompTIA does not allow you to take one exam from one series and another exam from another series. You have to write both exams from the same series. So if you're just starting out, you want to get the new ones, the 1101, the 1102. If you're already into it, you might want to get those older exams finished up before October rolls around. Now, when it comes to preparing for the exams, don't overthink it. I know some people go into this thinking that this is such a hard exam that anything that they can find on the internet, they're going to study. They're going to have flashcards and they're going to go to all these websites and everything else. I don't really think that that is particularly necessary. In my own case, I decided I was just going to get what I thought I really needed to get the job done. So what I did was I went to Udemy, which is, if you're not familiar with it, an online learning platform. And the great thing about Udemy is they have all kinds of online training for all kinds of careers, all kinds of things you might be interested in. And when it comes to studying for CompTIA exams, whether it's the A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, they've got all kinds of resources and they're relatively inexpensive. So I'm going to show you right now, if you do decide to do the same thing I did, which is go the Udemy route to get your A+, and there's tons of other routes that you can take. You can go straight to CompTIA and get their materials. There's all kinds of, Professor Messer, there's all kinds of other providers out there that provide information. But I found Udemy was the way to get it, where I was really confident in the materials I was getting, that they were applicable to the exam. Plus, it wasn't expensive. So let's take a look at what I did. We're going to go to my Udemy page here. This is my own account. And these are the 6 courses that I got in order to do the A+ exam. So you'll see that what we have here is we've got Mike Myers, A+ certification video courses. This is 221002 and 221001. So the 1001 is for hardware, 1002 is for software. I also got Mike's CompTIA A+ practice exams, which are these two. And then I got the practice exams from Jason Dion for both Core 1 and Core 2 as well. Now, why did I get these particular courses? Mike Myers, first of all, is probably one of the best known A+ trainers in the business. He's been around for a long time. He's very engaging to watch, and his material is really, really good. Now, I'm going to be honest, there are spots where I thought Mike missed the mark a little bit. There was a few things that I was like, I'm not so sure about that, or there were gaps. And in all those places, all I did was I went online and I started Googling. One of the things that he kind of glossed over recently, because I'm doing my Core 2 now as we speak. So one of the things he came over is we were talking about disk partitioning, and he kept interchanging the term partition and volume. And this is just an example. Now, I thought, oh, that's weird. Are they the same term, or are they two different things? So I went online, and sure enough, partition and volume are two different things. Very similar, but different. But to understand the difference, I then had to go and I had to learn all about when it comes to partitioning in MBR, partitioning in GPT, the history of Microsoft's partitioning formats, and how all this stuff worked. And so I kind of went off on my own for about 15 minutes and really learned in depth what the differences were and why they're labeled differently. So the information that Mike had wasn't wrong. It's just it's not specifically needed for this particular exam. So in order to flesh it out in my own mind, I had to go and get some extra material. And the reason I just bring up that story is because if you really want to do well on this exam, and I'm hoping that everybody that's watching this video, you're not going out just to remember some answers and pass an exam and that's it. I'm hoping that your goal is to really learn this material, to really understand it, to get to know it, so that when you are finished and you go to get a job in this field, you're actually a well-qualified, knowledgeable IT technician. Even if you're just a beginning technician, you're level 1, I'm hoping that you're going into this not just how fast can I get the exam done, but that you really want to learn the material, because I think long-term, that's the best way to approach anything that you're learning. And so no matter whose course you take, whether you go with Mike's or you go with somebody else, there's always going to be gaps because they can't get everything 100% for everybody's understanding. So one of my key tips, if you really want to pass the exams, is not just memorize what they tell you, but really do your own research when things don't make sense or you need to have more information. Dig down and make sure that you really understand what it is that you're looking at. So now when we look at these 6 programs, the way I suggest going about doing this is I would start off actually by writing a practice exam. So as you see, I've got Mike Myers' practice exams, I've got Jason Dion's practice exams. Pick a practice exam. I think there's 3 practice exams with each. So you get a total of 6 for Core 1 and 6 for Core 2. Before you even start studying, write a practice exam. See how much you know and how much you don't know. I was actually kind of surprised. I did that when I started my Core 2, and I scored 78%. So I know on Core 2, I probably don't have to spend as much time digging down really deeply as I did on Core 1, because I have a pretty solid knowledge already. The other thing that practice exam will do is it will show you the areas where you're weak. Maybe you're weak more in networking, maybe you're more weak in hardware, maybe you're more weak in operating systems, whatever it is. You'll pick out the areas where you're not doing that well. And I would actually be inclined to take those practice exams, and as you're studying, keep writing them, like do, a week's worth of studying or whatever it is, and then write a practice exam. You're not going to know all the answers, obviously, because you haven't done all the work. But it will give you an idea of how you're progressing and the parts that you're still weak in, and I think that's really invaluable. The other thing that I would really recommend, and this is just maybe, the way I learn, but I like the video courses because there's something there that's a whole lot different than a book. For me, when I'm just reading in a book, I read just fine, but it goes in one eyeball and out the other, like it's just gone. The videos, especially Mike's video, he's very engaging, and you get to see him actually working on computers and completing the tasks that he's talking about, which is invaluable. But the other thing that I find invaluable is to take lots of notes. I'm going to show you what my notes look like. And what I did was I broke it up into sections. So I took I have like the networking section, I have the hardware section, I have the mobile system section. And so I broke my notes up into different sections by topic, so that I could organize them better. And this is my networking notes. So if you look, as the video was playing, I simply typed out notes and I did screenshots of some of the material so that later on I could simply go back and review it. And the reason I recommend this is that one of the things that's difficult about studying for examinations, it's not so much understanding the material all the time, it's getting the ability to retain it. Understanding it is one thing, but really knowing it and having it in mind such that you can write an exam on it and call it back when you need it is tough. And for me, in the way I learn, what I find is by watching the video, by writing these notes, I got a really good handle on the material and it really sunk in. The act of writing out the notes really embeds it into your brain. Now, the other thing that I did was I put down specific information that I know I needed to memorize. For instance, here, this is my spreadsheet of things I need to memorize about networking, and I didn't put anything in here I already knew. Like, most of this is definitions. It's not stuff I was terribly familiar with the exact definitions on, so I put it in. And this just made it really easy for me. Before I started studying each day, I would go back and I would look at this list and run over it, and it just helped to reinforce everything that I was learning and making sure that I understand the principles. The other thing I did that helped, I'm going to make this available on my website, and that's techtalk.net, tektoc.net. I built this memory tool because, like a lot of people, my memory is terrible. Anything that I have to learn by just pure rote memorization, I really struggle with. So what I did was I built this tool so that I could test myself as we went along. And one of the things I was nervous about was the ports. So the way this tool works, it's simply a Google Sheets spreadsheet with some hidden columns. So when we look at the ports, all you have to do on here is type in the answer that you think, and it will tell you whether your answer is right or not. So port 20 I know is the FTP data port, 21 is the FTP control port, oops, which I just labeled as FTP. 22 is secure shell, 23 is telnet. So you just go along and it'll tell you whether you're right or not. And what this does is it simply makes it easy to give yourself a little test. And I did this again every morning, came down and run through this. Because repetition really does burn it into your brain. And I did this every morning right up until the morning, right up until and including the morning I took the exam. Before I went out for the exam, I ran up to my office, I fired up my computer, and I filled out this sheet just so it was fresh in my mind. So I will put this on my website. I think it's a pretty cool little tool. You can expand the hidden columns. It is secured just so that you don't accidentally delete things, but if you hit OK, that's fine. If you can expand the columns to see the answers, and then just right-click and go hide column to hide them again when you want to test yourself. So I'm going to put that on my website. Anybody can have access to it, make use of it. I think it's kind of a neat little tool to share with everybody. So having said all that, I only did the one course. I know people that will do 2, 3, 4 courses, they'll do a course plus read the book, etc. I really don't think that's necessary. I think if you do Mike's course and you research the things that maybe he's kind of glossed over a little bit or you have questions on, you really dig deep into it, and especially when you write practice exams. So write the practice exams as you're studying. And then when you're done studying the course, go through them again in detail. And for every question you get wrong, don't just figure out what the right answer is and say, okay, well, now I know what the answer is. Figure out why you got it wrong. Make sure you really understand what that question is about and why you made the error, and that you understand all the background things so that when the exam comes and you see a similar question, you'll say, oh, I know all about that. I remember researching that on Google or wherever. Because the thing about examination, sometimes we think that you have to remember everything up in your head verbatim. You don't. You just have to have a familiarity for it. Because the great thing about the CompTIA A+ exams is they are all multiple choice. So the answer's right there on the sheet. All you have to do to get that answer right is to have kind of a vague, fuzzy recollection of reading about it somewhere and know enough to guess, which answer is correct. And I shouldn't say guess, but to know which answer is correct. And so in the testing, this is really important. Because the testing, and I can't emphasize this enough, the A+ testing is all situational. And it's all troubleshooting. So it's all, here's your situation, here's your scenario, what's the best answer? It's not, what does DNS mean? It's going to give you a situation where there's an issue with DNS. Say, first of all, you're going to have to know what DNS is. You're going to have to know what a failure of DNS looks like, and you're going to have to know how to troubleshoot that failure and possibly where you should go to find the solution. It's not just enough to know that DNS is the domain name system and that's it. So that's what you should really be practicing. Troubleshooting is a big part of it. And referring back to my memorization sheet, you'll see that I actually did a whole page on troubleshooting. I wrote down all of Mike's tips on troubleshooting power supplies, troubleshooting core components, troubleshooting mass storage, troubleshooting mass monitors, and everything else all the way down through. Because these are things that, those tips that he gives when he talks about troubleshooting really are helpful if you're not familiar with what failures in a computing system look like and what repairing those failures looks like. You don't have to memorize them. You just have to read them enough that you get a feel for it. What does a failed power supply look like? What does a failed graphics card look like? What happens if you don't seat the RAM on a motherboard correctly? So that's not memorization. That's just be familiar with it so you have a basic understanding of how these things work. The test, or the practice test that I referred to, both Mike Myers and Jason Dion's, one of the things, when you finish your coursework, if you go to Jason Dion's practice tests, he has a fantastic course on how to write exams. His information on how to write exams is absolutely phenomenal. It's very clear. It's very, I don't want to say calculated because that's a bad word, but it's very methodical, not just in knowing the answers and putting them down, but how you go about testing, how you go about ruling wrong answers, what to do when you don't know an answer in order to get the best score possible. I'm a huge believer that 2/3 of doing well on these exams is knowing the material. 1/3 is knowing how to write a test effectively. And Jason Dion, he really does that. He will teach you how to write a test very effectively and make sure you get the best score humanly possible. I would absolutely suggest that you take that information to heart and really think about it before you go in and write your exam. So if you follow sort of the methodology that I did, I did the course, I did a couple of the practice exams along the way, I wrote my notes, I did my memorization exercises, and then I gave myself just a few days to review everything, to write all the practice exams again, to make sure I got it down, and then I went and wrote the exam. Doing that, I scored 859 out of 900, which I think is really good. It's exactly the way I'm going to do my Core 2 again. So one of the things, though, I want to really hammer home is the style of the exam. And I'm going to show you a sample question I wrote, and we're going to talk about how the best way to go about these types of questions is. Because this is exactly how most of the questions on the exam look. Now, these are the multiple choice questions, and there are the performance-based questions. And you will see a lot of people go, oh, the performance-based questions, really hard, really time-consuming, I don't know. It's not. The performance-based questions are just drag and drop. So rather than ticking a box that gives you the right answer, you'll have a bunch of options. You have to put them in the right place, or you have to put them in the right order. So it's almost like 4 questions or 5 questions in one, but you're just dragging things into a box. It's nothing to sweat about. If you know how to do the multiple choice answers, you'll know how to do the performance-based questions. I have no headaches with that. But this is what the questions look like. So let's take a look at this and let's see how we go about figuring out the answer to this question. Because the way you think about this, you're going to need for a lot of questions on the exam. So what we've got here, a user reports that when she turns her computer on, she has no video on her display. On looking at it, you note that when you press the power button, no fans inside the case turn on. What should you do first? And they really like these questions. What should you do first? So let's take a look at the question. So we have two pieces of evidence that tell us what might go on. The user, or might be going on. The user reported that she has no video. That's number one. Now, when you did your first little bit of investigation, when you hit the power button, you notice that no fans come on. So if a user says they have no video, you think, well, there's probably something wrong with the video driver or graphics card. That would make sense, right? Because there's no video. But the second piece of information, no fans turn on, how does that have a bearing? Well, if you hit the power button on a computer and the fans don't come on, that clearly means that there's no power to the motherboard. So when we look at that, what is more likely to be the primary case or a primary issue? If it was a graphics issue, a problem with the driver or the graphics card, that wouldn't stop the fans coming on. So now you'd have to be looking at two errors. But if the fans aren't coming on because there's no power to the motherboard, that would also mean that the video wouldn't play. So now you could have one point of error causing two issues. So that's very important to look at, because if you've got one point of error causing two issues potentially, that would more likely be the cause. So what we can do then is we can scratch out the no video. That isn't really what we should be hunting down. The fact that no fans come on is the bigger issue. So if the issue is that no fans on the case turn on, what could the problem be? So we've already decided that the fact that no fans come on is probably causing, the issue with the video as well. That seems like the most likely scenario. Would it make sense then that your issue should be to reinstall the graphics card driver? Well, of course not. That'd be silly. Plus, we know that the machine doesn't come on, so how are you going to do that? Right? And literally some of the questions are like that. Like, you can't do it because the issue with the computer won't let you. So we can scratch out reinstalling the video driver right now. We know that that's not going to solve the problem. So what about the other options? Should we reseat the RAM? Well, if the RAM's not reseated or not seated properly on the motherboard, that'll cause an issue, but it doesn't prevent power to the motherboard, does it? It'll give you error codes, it'll prevent the computer from booting up, but it doesn't stop the fans from coming on and the motherboard receiving power, so that's not very likely. Now, this is where this question gets interesting, and they do this a lot in the exam. The remaining two answers are, should you check the power supply with a tester, or should you check the PCs plugged in? What they're looking for here, you'll notice the question says, what should you do first? And they say that a lot. What should you do first? What is the most likely cause, they say. So when you look at these two answers, both are correct. Like, it could be an issue with the power supply, or it could be that it's not plugged in. And a lot of times when you're looking at this, you say, oh, well, plugged in. Well, you just assume it's plugged in. That's a stupid answer. But that's actually the answer they're looking for. Because the issue here is what they want is they want you to troubleshoot in a way that the simplest, cheapest, most obvious potential issue is looked at first. So what's easier, to look at the computer underneath the desk and say, oh yeah, it's not plugged in, or to start taking the computer apart and testing the power supply? Well, obviously looking to see if it's plugged in is easier. So a lot of the questions are going to be like this. There's going to be answers where there's multiple issues going on. You have to decide what the primary issue is likely to be based on the issues presented. And then you have to decide not just what is a correct troubleshooting procedure, but the correct order of procedures. And it should always be the cheapest and easiest first, unless something in the question states otherwise. So I can't emphasize enough that figuring out troubleshooting and knowing what errors are linked to what components is really important on the core one. Now the question that I get, and I save this for last, because usually this is what people want to hear first. And I like it last because that way you're kind of forced to watch my video all the way through to get to the good stuff. People want to know how long it takes to study for this exam. I'm going to tell you flat out, I have some IT experience. I've never worked in a business, but I am a hobbyist. I've built my own computers. I've, fiddled around with my home network. At work, I've worked for a couple of small businesses where I've had to work on the networks and work on the computers and whatnot. So I wouldn't say that I came into this cold. For me, when I did the exams, I basically took about 8 weeks for the core one. And I did get a really good mark, which means I probably overstudied. I probably could have cut that back by a couple of weeks. But to be clear, I'm not in a hurry. I'm not rushing out to get a job. I'm not unemployed or anything. So I was kind of doing this, at my pace. I studied probably on average an hour and a half a day, 5 days a week. I did no studying on the weekends because I wanted the weekends off. So in the evenings during the week, 1.5 hours about I did, and it took me 8 weeks to get her done and to get a really good score. The core 2 I'm doing way faster. I'm putting a little more time per day into it, but I'm finding it really straightforward. There's no reason why, if you really if you really want to get this done, there's no reason why you can't get core 1 done in a few weeks and core 2 done in a few weeks. If you're really going after it. But the thing that I can't emphasize enough is make sure you really understand the concepts. If there's things you don't get, and this is where the practice exams are huge. If there's things you don't get in the practice exams, don't satisfy yourself with just memorizing the answer. Really dig down, do a Google search, find out why the answer is what the answer is. Because as an IT technician, one of the things experienced technicians always say is the ability to search problems, to go on Google, search out what problems are, search the solutions. It's a great skill to have, and it's something that they use constantly. And so this is great practice before you get into doing IT work, to get into that habit of when you don't know something, really search it out for yourself and learn what the answer is. Now, as for costs, this is something that varies widely. If you go to CompTIA and you do the CompTIA materials, it can cost you a fair bit. There's lots of community colleges that teach the A+, and it's thousands of dollars. But here's the trick. Udemy is weird on their pricing. Like, I love Udemy. If anybody from Udemy is watching this, I love you guys. You're great. But the fact of it is, the pricing is bizarre. You go on Udemy, and each of those 6 courses I showed you will be 100. Last time I looked, I'm in Canada, so it was 104 Canadian, I think, was about the average for the courses. Wait 4 or 5 days, and there'll be a sale on where they're going for like $24 Canadian, 20 bucks US. I don't know why they do that, and those sales run constantly. It'll be like a week where they're running at full price, and the next week they're slashed 75% off. So whatever you do, if you're going to do what I'm recommending, which is to get the 2 Mike Myers courses and the 4 practice test courses, that should end up costing, like for me, it's about 100 bucks Canadian. If you're in the US, it's going to be cheaper. So if you make sure you buy them on sale, when it comes on sale, they'll probably all be on sale because for some reason the sale runs on everything on Udemy. But if you get them on sale, all your course material should be about like 100 bucks. And it's everything you need. It is like, I'm living proof. Those 6 courses are everything you need to pass the exam if you're halfway diligent about it. The exams are the pricey part. The exams are $239 US each. So 2 exams, $239 US each. You're looking at $478 US. The nice thing about having an expensive exam is it's great motivation not to flunk. Because if you fail, you have to buy another exam voucher to rebook that exam and to take it again. So the practice test, once you've got your training done, make sure you got those practice tests down. You should be getting 90-95% on them if you've gone over them multiple times. If you're doing that, if all those practice tests are going to have, between Mike Myers and Jason, you're going to have at least 6. If you're getting like 90-95, you're ready to write that exam. You will be fine. As long as you've done what I recommend, which is make sure that you really understand the ones you're not getting, why you're not getting them, and that you dig down and understand the principles behind the answers. So outside of that, if you're writing your A+, I wish you all the best. Don't freak out about it. This is not the hardest exam in the world. I think people make a much bigger deal out of it than necessary. Yes, you need to know your stuff. Yes, there's some memorization. But if you're halfway diligent about it, there's no reason why you can't do an awesome, awesome job on your exam. And most importantly, pass it on the first attempt. Again, I'm Graham Hughes. This is techtalk.net. Thanks so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.